there is a common sense segment of the Democratic Party that needs to bifurcate itself from this far left fringe, that needs to find the courage and the moral clarity to do it and to do it quickly. We've mentioned on this show, there's never been a better time to do that. If it wasn't during the chaos of 2020, during political violence that was carried out in the name of racial and social justice, if that wasn't a good time to separate yourself morally from that faction of the party, I can't think of a better or easier, more politically palatable time to do it now when that faction of the party has taken a turn toward anti-Semitism. Congressman Adam Smith, who's a Democrat from Washington, who's a very reasonable Democrat, who's very pro-Israel, who has spoken out about this left-wing activism. Well, I guess the punishment for doing that is that left-wing activists go and vandalize his house. Last night, my house was vandalized by people advocating for a ceasefire in Israel and Gaza. The attack is sadly reflective of the coarsening of political discourse in our country and is completely unwarranted, unnecessary, and harmful to our political system. Throughout the course of my career, my staff and I have continually met with groups from all parts of the political spectrum, including pro-Palestinian and left-wing activists. He says the extremism on both the left and right side of our political spectrum is a threat to a healthy, functioning democracy and has been condoned for far too long. The simple truth is that extremism on both sides is degrading our political system and must be rooted out for our democracy to be able to persist. I think that is exactly the right statement to put out. I think that him acknowledging, yes, there is a left wing in this country, and the left wing is dangerous. You want to focus so much in the media, and his own party wants to focus so much on the right wing and Donald Trump, which is fine. Focus on that, any sort of political extremism. But you can't focus on that when you turn a blind eye to what has been persistent, growing, active, dangerous left-wing extremism in Seattle and beyond. So I give a lot of credit to Congressman Adam Smith for coming out and saying what needs to be said. And by the way, in early November, Adam Smith was on this show, and he did the same thing. This is before this attack on his house, this vandalism on his house. He came on this show, which I think a lot of Democrats are afraid to do, and he spoke out against this brand of left-wing extremism.
Part of the problem is the extreme left-wing activist ideology, which tries to divide the world between oppressed and oppressor. And if you are part of the oppressors, your opinion, you don't matter. You are to be fought constantly. That extreme ideological way of looking at, public debate on policy issues coming from the left is very dangerous and very problematic.
It is very dangerous. And the unwillingness of so many Democrats to say so is what has allowed it to grow and to fester. Adam Smith, in this political environment, in this state, deserves a lot of credit for coming on this show and saying that. I have a lot of respect for the man, and I think he's saying what he's saying because he knows it's right and because he's not an extremist. Meanwhile, what is his Democratic colleague Pramila Jayapal doing? The chair of the House Progressive Caucus. While her Democratic colleague in the House from Washington State, representing the district right next to hers, while his home is being vandalized by these Hamas sympathizers, what is Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal doing?
Widespread use of rape, brutal rape, sexual violence against Israeli women by Hamas. I've seen a lot of progressive women, generally speaking, they're quick to defend women's rights and speak out against using rape as a weapon of war, but downright silent on what we saw on October 7th and what might be happening inside Gaza right now to these hostages. Why is that?
I mean, I don't know that that's true. I think we always talk about the impact of war on women in particular. In fact, I remember 20 years ago I did a petition around the war in Iraq.
Have you talked about it since October 7th?
Absolutely. And I've condemned what Hamas has done. I've condemned
specifically
all of
women?
the actions. Absolutely. The rape, of course. But I think we have to remember that Israel is a democracy. That is why they are a strong ally of ours. And if they do not comply with international humanitarian law, they are bringing themselves to a place that makes it much more difficult strategically for them to be able to build the kinds of allies to keep public opinion with them. And frankly, morally, I think we cannot say that one war crime deserves another. That is not what international humanitarian law says.
Okay, with respect, I was just asking about the women, and you turned it back to Israel. I'm asking you about Hamas. In fact,
I already answered your question, Dana. I said it's horrific, and I think that rape is horrific, sexual assault is horrific. I think that it happens in war situations. Terrorist organizations like Hamas obviously are using these as tools. However, I think we have to be balanced about bringing in the outrages against Palestinians. 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes, 3/4 of whom are women and children.
And it's horrible, but you don't see Israeli soldiers raping.
So here you have a story of two very different Democrats. And that's why on this show, you'll never hear us paint any party with a broad brush. You have a Democrat in Congressman Adam Smith, who has come on this show, who has, yes, talked about the right wing, but also talked about the left wing, who has condemned them, who has talked about their oppressors versus oppressed mentality, who weeks later at his home is subjected to anti-Israel graffiti. And at the exact same time, you have another Democrat, a progressive, a congresswoman, whose district is just a few miles away, who's doing a yeah, but when it comes to rape.